Authorities in Iran say that 4 prisoners have died and 61 others have been injured following a major fire at the country's notorious Evin prison. It's reported that the number of casualties at the facility, which is known for housing political prisoners, might be higher.
A fire at Iran's Evin prison has killed 4 detainees and injured more than 60, state media reported, as anti-government protests sparked by a woman's death in police custody continued on Sunday, including at several universities. Shots could be heard in video of the prison fire posted online. Protesters marched through traffic to the prison in solidarity with the inmates. The fire broke out in a sewing workshop on Saturday after what authorities said was a fight among prisoners convicted of financial crimes and theft. This Iranian state TV reporter said calm had been restored. Evin also holds many detainees on security charges, including Iranians with dual nationality. The 4 victims died of smoke inhalation. State media quoted Iran's judiciary as saying. The protest was sparked by 22-year-old Mahsa Amini's death while she was in the custody of Iran's morality police exactly a month ago. They have turned into one of the boldest challenges to Iran's clerical leadership since the 1979 revolution, and have met a brutal state crackdown. Rights groups say at least 240 protesters have been killed, including 32 minors. Iranian authorities haven't published a death toll.
Well, authorities in Iran say that 4 prisoners have died and 61 have been injured following that major fire at the country's notorious Evin prison. It's reported that the number of casualties at the facility, which is known for housing political prisoners, might be higher. Well, for a little bit more on these protests, we're now joined via Zoom by Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, who's a professor at Tehran University. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. A number of things that we can chat about. Let's begin, though, with this prison fire. Is it coincidence that this unrest that led to this fire and people dying is at a prison housing mostly political prisoners?
No, first of all, it is not a notorious prison. It was notorious when the Shah ruled over Iran and the United States helped the Shah create the SABC, the notorious secret police, to keep the population down. The Evin prison, like other prisons in Iran, have ordinary thieves and people who've broken the law. But these are not political prisoners, people who carry out riots, who burn buses, who burn ambulances, who burn down banks, who kill police officers. We've had 26 officers of the law murdered over the last 4 weeks. In the United States, that's a single officer. If they're killed, that would be seen as outrageous. But in the case of Iran, Persian language media owned by the West, funded by the West, they are egging on the rioters. And you can include BBC Persian, VOA Persian, Deutsche Welle Persian, Iran International, which is a Saudi outlet, but it's in London. These are all pushing for riots, and you have a huge cyber army. You have bots and trolls. And also big tech is helping through their algorithms. There are thousands of so-called Iranians in Albania, members of the MEK cult. If your viewers go and use a search engine and look up the MEK, the Mujahideen Khalq, they murdered 17,000 Iranians in the 1980s through assassinations, suicide bombings, and bomb attacks, and then they went to Iraq and fought as foot soldiers for Saddam Hussein. And right now, NATO supports them. Their main base is out in Albania, which is a part of NATO. So they have been organizing riots. They have been using their trolls, online trolls, to create fear and tension and misinformation. All of these would be against the law in Western countries, and especially in England, which has, if you look at Ofcom, they would never allow a British channel to behave as such.
All right, some might say that, look, you know, it's one thing for police officers to be attacked and killed, but it's also unacceptable for a civilian to die in police custody. And this is what sparked the riots. What has been the authorities' reaction and how they're going to deal with the fact that this young woman died in police custody?
Well, first of all, the reason why the protests erupted was that Persian language media in Western countries lied on day one. When she passed away, they immediately said, BBC Persian, Iran International, the Saudi outlet, and as I said, the NATO cyber army, they were saying that she was tortured and beaten to death. And even I thought that may be true because they were so open about it. Well, it turned out that after a protest started, the footage came out. She was not touched when she left the police van. She was not in cuffs. She went in a hall, spoke with someone, and then collapsed. It turned out that she had an operation, a major operation on her brain when she was young, and that the coroner's office, 19 of the country's top specialists, saw her body and the scans, the brain scans, and they said that she wasn't touched. So there was no evidence that she was beaten, that she was hurt, that she was battered, but Western Persian language media went with that in order to create chaos and disturbances and riots in Iran. And then after the riots began to die down after a couple of days, the protests, because initially people believed these, many people at least, believed these Western media claims. When the protests began to die down, then the rioters began. And those rioters, many of them who've been arrested, it's clear that they have been funded from outside of Iran, they've been organized from outside Iran, and they're linked to the MEK organization, which I said its central base is in Albania. They're linked to the Komole group in northern Iraq, Kurdistan, Iraq. They're saying this openly. They're linked to the monarchists who were overthrown 40-some years ago, and alongside the Pakistani border, the Jaish-ul-Adl Wahhabi group, which is sort of like ISIS. These different groups were all a part of the unrest in Iran, and they are all being funded by Western countries and Western allies in our region. So the problem I have with the introduction that you had was that it was all based on Western sources. They say she died in custody, which implies that she was beaten and battered to death. And as I said, when we look at let me give you an example. In England, in the UK, in 2011, August 2011, there were riots after police officers killed a young man in London. Five people, I think, died in the riots, 5 or 6 people. I don't know exactly. Your viewers can look it up. The police, the British Prime Minister was contemplating shutting down was contemplating shutting down Twitter, BlackBerry, and Facebook because they were being used by the rioters to gather in different parts of the city. Ultimately, they didn't do so because Twitter, BlackBerry back then was used extensively, and Facebook, BlackBerry, and Twitter, they cooperated with the government to arrest these people who were telling people where to gather. And then these people, many of them were put in jail. 2 men went to jail for 4 years in England because they told people to gather in a particular place on Facebook, even though their lawyers proved that their attempts failed. No one gathered at that particular place, but they each went to jail for 4 years. In the case of Iran, US big tech is helping these cyber armies that are outside of Iran to push for riots, to teach people how to make Molotov cocktails, to teach people how to attack police buildings. Even a reporter in one of these TV channels, Iran International, gave the names and addresses of certain people online so that people would go and attack them. That person is still working, and that person's Twitter account is still active. So basically, the United States and its NATO allies are desperately trying to undermine Iran, but they failed. They're not going to do so. They're not going to be able to do so because the Islamic Republic of Iran has a great deal of public legitimacy. Of course, Iran, like every other country, has problems. Iran has problems in the police force. It has problems with healthcare. It has problems with everything. It's a country under maximum pressure sanctions. But the Western narrative of Iran, I would argue, is extraordinarily misleading, and Western countries, on the one hand, try to strangle the Iranian people. Biden is trying to strangle ordinary people, to kill as many people as possible through maximum pressure sanctions. And could you possibly believe that he cares about Iranian women? He's murdering Iranian women.
Talking about Iranian women, there's a video that's gone viral on social media showing what purports to be police brutality by Iranian officers that are molesting a young woman. What has the authorities said about this?
Well, I don't know what particular clip you're looking at, but have you been watching any of the clips of the protests in Paris and in Italy and in Germany and in the UK these days over the price of fuel and the economic problems that people are facing? When if in Iran a police officer uses a baton, he is condemned for using violence. But in Europe and the United States, they're using it all the time. The only difference is that in Iran, foreign powers are encouraging people to attack the police and murder the police. There are lots of videos online showing dead policemen or police officers being beaten to death in Iran. Where in the world do you see such things? This is something that NATO countries are actively carrying out because they failed to undermine Iran. So, a video, these viral videos that are promoted in the West, they don't reflect the reality on the ground in Iran. The reality on the ground in Iran is that Western countries are helping rioters carry out acts of terrorism. The two police officers the night before last were killed with guns on the streets in a city in Iran. Where does that happen in the United States or the UK?
All right. Could these riots, yes, they may have been sparked by the death of Mr. Amani, but could they be about more dissatisfaction about general things in the country? Sometimes a spark lights the fire, but when people protest, their rage is about more and wider issues. Or do you think this is just an isolated situation that has escalated beyond what could be imagined?
In South Africa, I'm sure you have protests and you have riots, but you don't have foreign countries with hundreds of media outlets, more than exist inside South Africa, attacking the country day and night. That's what we have in Iran. We have hundreds of just TV stations, thousands of websites, tens of thousands of people Iranians hired abroad to work against the country. Many thousands of trolls in camps. This is not ordinary. So if in South Africa there is some problem in some township or in some city, or violence is committed somewhere, or an injustice occurs, then the police has to deal with it. Sometimes it gets out of control. Sometimes the police misbehaves. But in Iran, any small thing that happens is immediately used and becomes weaponized by BBC Persian, BOA Persian, Deutsche Welle Persian, Iran International, Manoto, many thousands of Telegram groups. You have hundreds of the cyber army that is used against Iran by Western countries is beyond belief. If the whole population of China and India combined were tweeting against Iran, we wouldn't have that many people tweeting. It's all big tech and Western countries that are behind these operations. And then simultaneous to that, you have weapons being brought into the country. As I said, the night before last, 2 police officers were murdered. So misinformation. This is about Western hegemony, Western domination. And I think that people in South Africa know a thing or two about that. Under apartheid, the South African government, they were the good guys, and the anti-apartheid activists were the bad guys. And of course, Iran was supporting the anti-apartheid activists and resistance forces, and the resistance, and Iran was, considered bad. So I wouldn't take Western media narratives too seriously.
Professor Marandi, always good talking to you. Thank you so much. Your insights greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Professor Marandi speaking to us about the situation in Iran. It's been 4 weeks now since riots started. They seem to be spreading across the country. Professor Marandi suggesting that this is a well-orchestrated machinations of the West inciting of riots and violence within the country, but they continue, and journalists are complaining that their voices are being muzzled. One journalist saying that he was arrested for putting up a picture of Miss Amani's parents hugging.